Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The Galactic Alliance's Station Theta-9 was a chaotic masterpiece of engineering and diplomacy, a gargantuan hub where species from across the stars mingled, traded, and confused the living daylights out of one another. To Mike Brennan, Earth's junior ambassador and glorified errand boy, it was just another day of sensory overload. Station Theta-9, he muttered, sidestepping a gelatinous blob oozing across the corridor. Where the weird is normal, and humans are still the ones who get stared at. Mike wasn't exactly a VIP on the station, but humans were new enough to the Alliance that every Earthling drew attention, whether they wanted it or not. As a representative of humanity, Mike had come to embrace the stares. Still, today was supposed to be simple. Food. Nothing more, nothing less. And the diner called The Melting Chalice promised to serve acceptable fare for human stomachs, at least according to a blue-skinned reptilian diplomat who claimed it wouldn't liquefy Mike's intestines. That was about as good as endorsements got out here. Inside the diner, Mike was met with a swirl of color and sound. Hovering tables shifted positions automatically, chairs vibrated when alien patrons grew agitated, and what might have been music, or a malfunctioning garbage disposal, thumped from overhead speakers. Behind the counter, Zyla, the gangly, four-armed waitress, was multitasking like a champion. She balanced trays with two hands, scribbled orders with another, and gestured with the fourth. Her skin shimmered like liquid amethyst under the lights, and 7 blinking eyes swiveled independently, tracking multiple customers at once. As soon as Zyla saw Mike, all her attention zeroed in on him like a predator spotting prey. Her face split into what Mike assumed was a smile. A human, she shrieked, all 7 eyes locking on him. How exotic. Please, sit, sit. Mike hesitated but obeyed, slipping onto a floating stool that adjusted itself to accommodate his awkwardly bipedal frame. Zyla hovered at his table before he even touched the surface. Is it true you only have 2 arms? She asked, pointing all 4 of hers at him as if to make a point. Yeah. Mike replied, unsure where this was going. And 2 legs? 1 heart. 1 liver. Pretty standard for us. Zyla's head tendrils blinked through a rainbow of colors, an apparent sign of fascination. How do you even function with such limitations? Mike smirked. Carefully. Zyla slapped a glowing notepad onto the table with such force that Mike flinched. What do you wish to consume, human? We have soup, nutrient paste, and simulated sustenance blocks. Mike scanned the menu skeptically. What's in the soup? Water. Just water. Zyla beamed. Mostly. Fine, I'll take the soup. He sighed, surrendering. As Zyla scribbled on her notepad, each of her hands somehow writing independently, she peered at Mike again. Tell me, human, what is your most impressive skill? I hear every species has something unique to offer. Mike blinked, caught off guard. Skill. I mean, humans are pretty good at endurance. Endurance? Yeah, you know, repeating tasks, pushing through fatigue, that kind of thing. Zyla's head tendrils rippled like ocean waves. You mean, like repetition? Mike yawned, rubbing his face. Yeah. For example, we eat, work, and do all sorts of things 5 times a day. Zyla froze mid-scribble. Her 7 eyes widened to the size of saucers, and her tendrils flashed a bright, glowing red. 5 times a day. Seriously? Her shout echoed through the diner, halting every conversation like a needle scratching across a record. Silence fell. Every alien turned to stare at Mike. Mike blinked, now suddenly the center of attention. What? What did I say? Zyla's limbs flailed in exasperation. You perform essential biological or functional tasks 5 times a day. You repeat actions that often. For survival. Mike stammered, sensing he'd kicked off something big. I mean, yeah. We eat multiple meals, work in cycles, stuff like that. It's normal. Across the room, a gelatinous alien with 3 eyes gasped audibly. They're hyperproductive. A scaled reptilian whispered, are their systems that inefficient that they need to reboot 5 times daily? The tentacled creature at the next table muttered, they must regenerate rapidly. 5 times, they must be unstoppable. Mike pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay, there's been a misunderstanding here. But Zyla ignored him, whirling to face the room. She raised all 4 arms dramatically. The human claims to repeat tasks 5 times a day. Their species must be the most industrious, relentless, and biologically exceptional in the Alliance. The room erupted into chaos. Aliens argued with each other, speculating on Mike's repetition cycles. They probably hibernate briefly between each cycle. No, it's a form of microevolution. They regenerate brain cells faster than we can. Mike groaned, burying his face in his hands. For the love of, guys, it's not that deep. Before he could escape, a massive shadow loomed over his table. Mike looked up to find a towering alien, 8 feet tall, armored in shimmering crystalline plates, staring down at him. It was a Jorik, one of the galaxy's most competitive and physically dominant species. The Jorik warrior pointed a clawed finger at Mike. I challenge you, human, the Jorik bellowed. Its voice sounded like rolling thunder. Prove your endurance against me. If you claim to repeat tasks 5 times, let us see it. Mike blinked. Wait, what? Zyla clapped her hands excitedly, her eyes flashing green. Oh. A Jorik challenge. This is rare. This is fantastic. The entire diner erupted in cheers. Aliens slapped tables, vibrating in excitement. The Jorik leaned closer, crystalline scales shimmering under the lights. Will you accept, human? Or will your species' reputation fall into question? Mike sighed deeply, already regretting his life choices. I'm going to regret this, aren't I? Zyla grinned. Don't worry. It'll only be 5 times harder than you expect. Mike groaned. Someone, get me that soup first. The diner hummed with anticipation. Word of the human challenge spread through Station Theta 9 like a solar flare tearing across empty space. Aliens of every shape and size crowded near the entrance of the melting chalice, peering in through windows, floating above tables, or wedging themselves into every available corner. Mike Brennan, humanity's reluctant ambassador, slouched in his stool, cradling a bowl of what was generously called water soup. A metallic tang lingered in his mouth. He stared into the swirling liquid, contemplating his poor life choices. Why me? He muttered. Zyla hovered gleefully beside him, her head tendrils flashing in a dance of excitement. Because you're human. And humans are fascinating. I've never seen a species boast about repetition before. I wasn't boasting, Mike said. I was tired and hungry. There's a difference. You mentioned performing tasks 5 times a day, Zyla said, poking him with a gleaming notepad. A feat unheard of in the Alliance. Unheard of? Mike asked, squinting at her. Most species are efficient, task completion is sacred. Repetition wastes energy. But you humans, oh, you break the mold. You're like overclocked drones with squishy brains. That's not a compliment. Before Zyla could respond, the towering Jorik warrior stepped forward again, his crystalline plates clinking like shards of glass under pressure. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Human. I am Morvac, son of Vral, champion of the Jorik endurance trials. If you claim to possess unmatched stamina, you will prove it to me. Mike sighed, waving his spoon in the air. Okay, look. First of all, I don't claim anything. You guys just made up a bunch of nonsense. Rorvac slammed a clawed fist on a nearby table, shattering the hovering platform into a shower of sparks. The crowd gasped. You dare insult the challenge? Rorvac growled, eyes flaring with molten light. To refuse would dishonor your species. Mike dropped the spoon into his soup with a plink. Isn't that a bit dramatic? Zyla chimed in helpfully. The Joreks are known for endurance challenges. Rorvac once ran across a desert moon for 70 hours without pausing. Mike blinked. What is he, a crystal kangaroo? Rorvac loomed closer, his imposing figure casting Mike in shadow. If humans are weak, say it now. A murmur passed through the crowd. Eyes, whether blinking, glowing, or floating, fixed on Mike expectantly. He knew the look. It was the same one he got during Earth's first alliance meetings when skeptical aliens had dismissed humans as harmless apes. They wanted a show. Mike exhaled through his nose, sat up straight, and looked Rorvac in the eye. Fine. What's the challenge? The room exploded into excited chatter. Zyla vibrated in place, clapping two of her hands together. Oh, this will be glorious. The challenge begins. Station Theta 9 Central Atrium had been converted into an impromptu arena within an hour. Massive crowds packed the observation platforms while drones floated above, broadcasting the event live across the station's comm network. Alien vendors popped up along the edges, selling snacks that glowed, wriggled, or occasionally hissed. Mike stood at the center of the arena, flanked by Zyla, who had appointed herself his manager, and a team of nervous-looking humans who'd somehow been dragged into this madness. What exactly am I supposed to be doing here? Mike asked, eyeing the series of obstacles laid out across the arena, climbing walls, sprinting tracks, heavy objects to lift, and what appeared to be a giant rotating hamster wheel. Zyla grinned. The challenge consists of 5 tasks, one for each of your alleged cycles. You must complete all of them, 5 times. Mike stared at her. You're joking. Nope. He groaned. You aliens really know how to take a joke and make it everyone's problem. Across the arena, Rorvac loomed like a crystalline colossus, stretching his arms with sharp cracks. His voice boomed through the speakers. The human shall fall after 1 cycle. Their species is not built for this. Mike muttered under his breath, oh, it's on, shiny. Task 1, the sprint. The first task was simple, a 100-meter sprint. Mike watched as Rorvac launched himself down the track, his massive crystal body moving with surprising speed. Aliens cheered as he completed the distance in mere seconds. Beat that, human. Zyla shouted gleefully. Mike shrugged off his jacket, cracked his neck, and jogged to the starting line. Ready? A robotic voice called. Begin. Mike didn't break any world records, but he sprinted the length of the track and back, breathing hard but grinning. He wasn't even winded yet. Zyla's tendrils blinked. You're smiling. You ran that whole distance. That was just a warm-up. Task 2, the climb. The second task involved scaling a 20-foot vertical wall. Rorvac scrambled up using brute strength, digging his claws into the surface and leaving cracks behind him. When it was Mike's turn, he gripped the holds, hoisted himself up, and climbed methodically. Years of gym class and rock climbing with friends back on Earth paid off. By the time he touched the top, the crowd was murmuring with interest. Humans have grip strength, a tentacled alien hissed. And endurance, another added. Task 3, the wheel. The third task nearly broke him. The hamster wheel spun faster than he anticipated, and Rorvac's crystal bulk crushed forward with raw power. Mike stumbled at first but quickly found his rhythm. His legs burned, sweat poured down his face, but he kept moving. You call this hard? Mike shouted, forcing a grin through gritted teeth. I've had to run for my life after missing the last bus home. Zyla hollered in excitement. He's still going. Round 2 and beyond. By the end of the second full cycle, Rorvak's crystalline armor dripped with condensation. Jorik's didn't sweat, but they overheated. Mike, meanwhile, chugged water handed to him between tasks. His shirt stuck to his skin, but he grinned and waved to the crowd. "I thought this was supposed to be a challenge," he called. The aliens' awe grew with each repetition. By the fourth cycle, Rorvak's movement slowed, his claws digging into the ground for stability. Mike, though clearly exhausted, refused to stop. "This is what humans do," Zyla explained to an incredulous crowd. "They don't stop. They just keep going." The turning point. As the fifth and final round began, Rorvak collapsed onto one knee, his crystalline form cracking under strain. Gasps echoed through the arena. Mike, panting and drenched, stood tall, hands on his knees. "You giving up already?" he asked between breaths. Rorvak growled but did not rise. The arena exploded with cheers as Mike completed the last climb, pounding the top of the wall triumphantly. He turned to the crowd, arms raised. "And that's how humans do it, 5 times a day." The arena echoed with a deafening mix of cheers, astonished murmurs, and the clang of Rorvak's crystalline form collapsing in exhaustion. The mighty Jorik warrior, pride of his species, had been defeated. Yet there stood Mike Brennan, sweaty, panting, and victorious. 5 times a day, Zyla whispered in awe, her luminescent tendrils flickering through the full spectrum of colors. "And you call us strange?" Mike grinned, leaning on his knees for support. "I told you we're good at repetition. You didn't believe me." The crowd roared, their admiration growing as aliens chattered among themselves. "They just keep going. How do their bodies not collapse under the strain? Maybe the humans are biomechanical." Floating drones hovered around Mike, broadcasting close-ups of his sweat-soaked face to the station's many screens. His casual, lopsided grin seemed to cement an image: humanity's resilience was real. Aftermath: galactic shockwaves. As the crowd began to disperse, Mike collapsed onto a nearby bench, gulping down water like a man stranded in the desert. Zyla bounced around him excitedly, scribbling notes furiously on her glowing pad. "You were incredible," she said, all 4 hands gesturing at once. "Humans must be renowned on your world for endurance feats like this." Mike laughed weakly, wiping his forehead. "Not really. That was just another Tuesday." "Tuesday?" Mike shook his head. "Forget it. The point is, we're stubborn. You've got shiny crystal warriors and plasma-firing octopus people, but humans? We don't quit. We grind through the pain." Zyla's eyes all widened at once. "Is this why your species performs tasks 5 times a day? Does it train you to survive?" Mike opened his mouth to respond, then hesitated. If he told the truth, that humans ate meals, worked in shifts, and brushed their teeth that many times, he had a feeling the aliens might riot. A galaxy full of species that prioritized efficiency wouldn't understand. He decided to roll with the legend. "Yeah, something like that." The rumors begin. The Joriks, though a proud and competitive species, were fair in their loss. Rorvak himself approached Mike after the challenge, still breathing heavily but extending one clawed hand. "You are an honorable adversary, human," Rorvak rumbled, his molten eyes blazing with respect. "I underestimated you." Mike clasped the warrior's massive hand. "Good match. You didn't make it easy." "Never have I seen a species endure such repetitive trials," Rorvak continued, shaking his head. "Your kind must truly be built for war." Sure," Mike replied, unsure of how to correct him. As the two shook hands, Zyla recorded the moment and uploaded it to the Alliance network, the galactic version of social media. Within minutes, the clip had gone viral. Headlines blared across stations and ships. Human outlasts Joric champion in legendary challenge. Biological marvels, humans perform 5 cycles without collapse. The endurance species, could humans be the next power in the alliance? The galactic debate. By the next day, Mike had become something of a celebrity. Everywhere he went, alien eyes turned toward him with curiosity, reverence, or outright disbelief. In the corridors of Station Theta 9, conversations about humanity echoed from every corner. They repeat actions daily and survive. That's impossible. I heard their bodies heal as they sleep. Can they fight 5 times a day too? Mike sat in the station's commissary, trying to enjoy a plate of dubious-looking protein paste. Zyla, perched on the opposite side of the table, rapidly clicked through her data pad. Your kind has shaken the alliance, Mike, she said gleefully. Did you see the analysis reports? Everyone's speculating about human physiology now. Speculating? Mike asked, poking his paste skeptically. About what? Zyla's head tendrils blinked in unison. Well, they're asking the big questions. What makes humans so resilient? How do you thrive with so little efficiency? One scientist believes your repetitive cycles trigger genetic upgrades. Mike choked on his food. What? It's a theory. Zyla said defensively. Honestly, humans are fascinating. Your species keeps surprising us. Before Mike could reply, a soft hum resonated through the station speakers, followed by an announcement. Ambassador Brennan to the council chamber. Immediate attendance required. Zyla froze mid-scribble. Oh. Did you do something illegal? Mike sighed, pushing his tray aside. Not yet. Council chamber, humanity on trial. The council chamber was an enormous dome of polished metal and glowing energy conduits. Alien dignitaries sat in concentric rings, their varied forms ranging from gaseous clouds to armored titans. At the center stood Mike Brennan, very much aware of how small he looked compared to the rest of the species present. A green-skinned counselor with mandibles and 6 arms rose to speak. Ambassador Brennan, it has come to our attention that your species possesses unusual biological capabilities. Endurance unmatched in the Alliance. Mike shifted uncomfortably. Thanks. The counselor ignored him. The galaxy demands clarity. Is it true that humans perform tasks 5 times a day, as widely reported? Mike opened his mouth, fully intending to tell them it was a misunderstanding. Then he caught the expressions around him, creatures that could crush mountains or generate electricity with their minds, gawking at him in awe. In that moment, Mike realized something: this misunderstanding had made humanity seem formidable. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. He squared his shoulders, stood a little taller, and said, yeah. That's true. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The gaseous ambassador's form flickered in shock. The green-skinned counselor hesitated. And you choose this? Repetition is inefficient. Dangerous. It's who we are, Mike replied smoothly. We adapt. We persevere. Doesn't matter how hard it gets, we get back up and do it again. The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the alien dignitaries. Zyla, watching from the observation deck, barely contained her excitement as she whispered, HFY. Finally, the counselor nodded. Then humanity's place in this galaxy grows clearer. You are tenacious. Mike smirked. We try. The human reputation grows. By the end of the day, humanity's reputation across the Galactic Alliance had shifted. No longer dismissed as squishy apes, humans were now regarded as relentless, adaptable, and biologically fascinating beings. Zyla bombarded Mike with messages, each one showcasing memes, news articles, and videos of his performance. One particularly popular clip showed Mike collapsing onto the arena bench, captioned, "Humans, tired but victorious." Mike leaned back in his quarters, shaking his head at the madness. 5 times a day, he muttered to himself with a chuckle. Who knew that's all it would take? The station hadn't been this loud since the Alliance voted to regulate sentient plasma beings. Mike Brennan, now an accidental legend, couldn't take 2 steps without someone gawking at him, whispering, or outright asking ridiculous questions. Is it true humans can regenerate limbs 5 times? Do you consume stars for energy? Are you preparing for galactic conquest? Conquest? Mike muttered, adjusting his collar as he shuffled down the crowded hall. I can barely conquer my laundry. Humanity's rising stock. News of Mike's endurance and supposed 5 cycles feat rippled across the Galactic Alliance, sparking everything from scientific debates to overblown rumors. Humans had become the species to watch, scrappy underdogs hiding impressive biological resilience. While Mike's performance had earned humanity newfound respect, not everyone saw it that way. The Jorix, humiliated by Rorvak's public defeat, refused to let it go quietly. In a gleaming conference hall deep within Theta 9, Counselor Thralic of the Joric Dominion slammed his massive claws on the table, his crystalline plates vibrating with rage. This cannot stand, he bellowed to a cluster of Joric advisors. A mere human has humiliated our kind before the galaxy. They will not be allowed to rest on this false glory. One of his aides hesitated. But, Counselor, the human did outperform Rorvak. Silence. Thralic growled. They tricked us. A species as fragile as theirs cannot naturally perform such feats. He paused, narrowing his molten gaze. We will challenge them again. This time, they will break. An official invitation. Mike had just settled into his quarters for some much-needed rest when the door chimed. Groaning, he dragged himself up and opened it to find Zyla vibrating with excitement, holding a holographic tablet. You've got mail, she said, shoving the tablet into his hands. What is this? Galactic spam? Mike grumbled. It's an official summons. Zyla announced. From the Joric Dominion. You've been invited to a rematch. Mike's brow furrowed. A rematch? With Rorvak? Nope. Zyla's tendrils flashed bright green. The challenge comes straight from their High Council. If you accept, you'll face the Joric elite, their strongest endurance champions. It's a matter of pride. Mike slumped onto his chair, rubbing his temples. Great. I beat one guy at an obstacle course, and now an entire warrior race wants to crush me. Zyla leaned closer, eyes wide. You have to accept. Humanity's reputation is at stake. Mike groaned. Why do I feel like this is a bad idea? Because it probably is, Zyla chirped. But you humans love bad ideas. Preparing for the challenge. Word of the rematch spread across Theta 9 and beyond. Drones broadcast the announcement across every channel. Humanity faces Joric elite in the ultimate endurance challenge. Can the endurance species defeat the Jorics again? Will humans break, or prove their legend? Mike found himself dragged into preparations whether he liked it or not. Zyla had appointed herself his training manager, and assembled a small team of overenthusiastic aliens eager to study human physiology. This is not necessary, Mike grumbled as a floating drone zapped his reflexes with a harmless pulse. Nonsense. Zyla said, watching intently. We must understand how your species handles stress, repetition, and pain. Mike crossed his arms. I handle stress with coffee and sarcasm. Pain's negotiable. That explains so much, Zyla muttered, scribbling furiously on her pad. The arena, Humanity vs. Joric Elite. The challenge was held in Theta 9's largest arena, its dome retracting to showcase the swirling nebulae beyond. Thousands of aliens filled the seats while broadcasts streamed to systems across the galaxy. Vendors sold glowing snacks, and betting booths hummed with activity. At the center of the arena stood 5 hulking Jorik warriors, each one larger and more imposing than Rorvak. Their crystalline armor gleamed like diamonds in starlight, and molten energy glowed from the cracks in their bodies. Mike, in contrast, stood there in a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, clutching a water bottle. "This seems fair," he muttered sarcastically. The announcer, a hovering robot with flashing screens, boomed, "Welcome to the Galactic Endurance Trials." The Jorik elite faced the human champion, Mike Brennan. The crowd roared. Zyla, standing just outside the arena, shouted through a comlink. "Remember, Mike, the key is repetition. You're representing all humans here." "Great," Mike muttered. "No pressure. Task 1, Strength of Endurance." The first challenge was a lifting trial, a massive stone-like weight that had to be lifted above one's head, repeatedly. The Jorik warriors began the task with a roar, hoisting the weights with ease. Their crystalline muscles rippled, and the crowd cheered as they lifted again and again. Mike approached his weight, eyeing it skeptically. "This thing's heavy enough to flatten a car." "You'll be fine," Zyla shouted from the sidelines. Gripping the weight, Mike planted his feet, exhaled sharply, and hoisted it upward. His muscles screamed, but the weight rose, barely. He dropped it back down, panting. The Joriks had already completed 10 reps. "Keep going," Zyla urged. Mike grit his teeth. Humans didn't always win by strength, but they won by stubbornness. He lifted again. And again. And again. By the 15th rep, 2 of the Jorik warriors slowed, their crystalline forms cracking from the stress. Mike, drenched in sweat and shaking, pushed through the pain. Task 2, the Endurance Sprint. The second task was a multi-mile sprint around the arena. The Joriks launched forward like stampeding beasts, their heavy forms crashing with each step. Mike jogged behind them, pacing himself. "You can't win like that," Zyla shouted. Mike grinned between breaths. "It's not about speed. It's about finishing." 2 laps in, the Joriks started to slow. Crystalline limbs weren't made for long-distance running. Mike's steady pace began to close the gap. By the 5th lap, he was neck and neck with the final warrior. "Humans are still moving," a voice from the crowd exclaimed. Task 3, the Hamster Wheel of Doom. The third challenge returned, the infamous spinning hamster wheel. By this point, the Jorik elite were visibly cracking, their bodies straining under the repeated stress. Mike's legs felt like concrete, but his mind screamed, "Just keep going." He threw himself onto the wheel, stumbling at first, then finding rhythm. He imagined every late-night cram session, every bad workout, and every moment on Earth when quitting wasn't an option. By the end of the task, 2 Jorik warriors had collapsed. Mike stumbled off the wheel, gulping water and flashing a thumbs up to the roaring crowd. Pushing to the finish. With 2 tasks remaining, only 1 Jorik remained, a massive warrior with fractures spreading through his crystalline body. Mike, drenched and exhausted, stood tall. Zyla's voice crackled through his calm, "You're doing it, Mike. You're proving humanity's worth." Mike grinned weakly, sweat dripping into his eyes. "Yeah. Because quitting sucks." The arena was alive with chaos, cheering aliens, buzzing drones, and the deafening hum of the Galactic Alliance's broadcast systems. At the center of it all, Mike Brennan stood on shaky legs, drenched in sweat but still upright. Across from him loomed the last remaining Jorik elite, his crystalline form splintered and flickering with molten cracks. "Just 2 tasks left," Mike muttered to himself. "2 more, and I'm done." Zyla's voice crackled through the arena comlink. "Mike, you've got this. The crowd loves you. You're trending everywhere. #EnduranceApe. Endurance what?" Mike groaned, wiping his face with his sleeve. The announcer's booming robotic voice echoed through the arena. Task 4, the Endurance Balance Test. A series of narrow, floating platforms appeared above the arena floor, each one hovering over a pool of gelatinous, semi-sentient goo. Falling wouldn't kill you, but you'd definitely wish it had. The fourth task, balance and grit. The Jorik champion, his crystalline plates grinding loudly, stepped onto the first platform with heavy, deliberate movements. The platforms wobbled under his weight, but he powered forward, muscle and bulk fighting against the instability. Mike frowned. "You've got to be kidding me. What's wrong?" Zyla asked nervously. "I've got spaghetti legs and I'm supposed to walk a tightrope over alien jello." "Nothing at all." The whistle sounded. Mike exhaled and stepped onto the first platform. The surface tilted immediately, nearly sending him sideways. He spread his arms, knees bent, wobbling like a cartoon character. "Okay, balance. Balance is key." He took a step. Then another. The crowd held its collective breath as Mike wobbled, his sneakers slipping slightly on the smooth surface. Across the course, the Jorik snarled as he forced his massive form forward, cracks spreading with every step. Mike kept moving, talking to himself as he went. "Come on, man. You've walked home drunk before. Same rules apply. Just one step at a time." The aliens didn't understand the muttering, but they watched with rapt attention. To them, Mike's clumsy but determined approach was extraordinary. Halfway through, the Jorik warrior's platform snapped under his weight. The crowd gasped as the massive alien plummeted into the goo with a squelch. Mike froze mid-step, blinking as the Jorik disappeared below the surface. Did he? A slow, bubbling growl confirmed the Jorik wasn't gone for good, but his chance at winning was. Mike grinned. "Guess that's one way to finish early." The crowd erupted as Mike reached the final platform and stepped onto solid ground. He raised both arms, gasping for air. "Humans balance." Zyla shouted proudly into her comms. Mike collapsed onto the bench nearby. "More like humans don't fall on their face. That's enough for me." The final task, mind over matter. A hush fell over the arena as the robotic announcer spoke again. Final task, the focus trial. At the center of the arena, a glassy chamber materialized, containing what looked like a shimmering, pulsating orb of light. Drones lowered a chair into the chamber, along with electrodes and a neural interface. Mike squinted. What am I looking at?" Zyla's voice buzzed in. "The focus trial is a mental endurance test. You have to hold your concentration on the orb. The longer you focus, the harder it gets. The Joriks traditionally use it to test warriors for mental fortitude." "Great," Mike muttered. "Endurance of the brain now." The Jorik warrior, covered in dripping goo, stomped back into view. He was battered, cracked, and furious, but still willing to compete. "The human will fall," the Jorik growled. "Mind trials require discipline beyond his kind." Mike stared at the alien, then at the orb. "You know what? Bring it. The focus trial begins." Mike strapped the neural interface onto his head and sat in the chair. The orb floated before him, a hypnotic swirl of light and sound that shifted in unsettling ways. At first, it seemed easy. All he had to do was focus on the center of the orb. His heartbeat steadied, his breathing slowed. He let the swirling patterns pull him into their rhythm. Then the orb fought back. It began to pulse with sharp flashes of light, designed to disorient him. The sound shifted into sharp, painful tones that drilled into his ears. Mike grunted, squeezing his eyes shut for a moment before forcing them open again. "Nope. Not tapping out." The Jorik warrior next to him growled, crystalline fingers digging into his chair. The orb's psychic strain cracked his molten exterior as his breathing grew ragged. Mike, on the other hand, fell into a strange zone. His mind wandered to every time he'd pulled an all-nighter, every boring corporate meeting, Every college lecture he'd survived by staring at a wall and letting his thoughts drift. The orb flashed brighter. The sound roared. Mike blinked lazily. Is that all you've got? I've tuned out worse. The crowd gasped as the Jorik warrior let out a final roar and collapsed onto the floor, unconscious. Mike sat back in his chair, staring at the orb, his brain fried but victorious. Humans, he muttered, are really good at zoning out. Victory and shock. The arena exploded with sound as the robotic announcer declared. The human champion, Mike Brennan, is victorious. Zyla screamed in triumph from the sidelines, her tendrils pulsing bright yellow. He did it. He did it. Humanity wins. Mike slumped in his chair, utterly exhausted but grinning like an idiot. The remaining Joriks, their pride shattered, stood silently as the alien crowd swarmed around Mike, cheering and shouting questions. How do you endure so much strain? Is mental fortitude a biological adaptation? Are all humans like this? Mike smirked tiredly, looking around the crowd. Pretty much. We don't know when to quit. Galactic respect. News of Mike's victory spread faster than a warp jump. Across the Galactic Alliance, humans were no longer seen as fragile or insignificant. They were resilient, adaptable, and just plain stubborn. At a station cafe the next day, Mike sat nursing a real cup of coffee, imported from Earth as a gift for his contributions. Zyla sat opposite him, scrolling through her data pad. You're famous now, she said, showing him headlines. Humans, the galaxy's stubborn survivors. Endurance above all, why humans might be the perfect allies. Joriks defeated by squishy human. Mike grinned. You know, I didn't plan to become an endurance legend. Zyla tilted her head, her eyes blinking with humor. Your species has earned respect, Mike. You have earned respect. Mike sipped his coffee, looking out at the bustling station. Good. Because we're just getting started. It had been 3 days since Mike Brennan conquered the Jorik Elite Endurance Challenge, and the buzz hadn't died down. Across the Galactic Alliance, the story of the human who wouldn't quit had reached every corner of known space. News stations ran endless highlights of the match, and alien analysts dissected humanity's endurance advantage with feverish interest. For Mike, this sudden fame had come with a few complications. What do you mean you sign me up for another event? Mike shouted, staring at Zyla across the station cafe table. The four-armed alien waitress turned manager grinned, her tendrils glowing an unrepentant yellow. Think of it as building momentum. The Alliance can't stop talking about you. You've become the face of human stubbornness. We need to keep the legend alive. I'm not a superhero. Mike groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. I'm just a guy who didn't know when to quit. And that's why you're so inspiring. Zyla said, showing him her glowing data pad. Look. The Galactic Sports Network wants to feature you in a cross-species competition next week. Oh, and there's a scientist from the Varick Collective who wants to study your repetitive endurance cycles. Mike sighed and took a long sip of his coffee, which, thankfully, had been delivered straight from Earth. If I become an experiment in an alien lab, I'm blaming you. Zyla clapped her hands together gleefully. You'd be famous. Anyway, I already accepted the offer. You're officially competing at the Galactic Marathon of Endurance. Mike nearly choked on his coffee. The what? The Galactic Marathon of Endurance. Station Theta 9 buzzed with excitement as word spread of Mike's next challenge. The Galactic Marathon of Endurance was a legendary event, a grueling, multi-phase endurance trial held once every 5 years. Species from across the Alliance sent their toughest competitors to prove their stamina and fortitude. Most participants were biomechanical titans, energy-based lifeforms, or creatures specifically evolved for extreme environments. Humans had never even been invited before. Why are we doing this again? Mike asked as Zyla led him through a massive crowd toward the event starting zone. Because you're representing humanity. Zyla replied cheerfully. The galaxy wants to know if your species can really handle endurance trials. They're calling you the marathon machine. Mike grumbled. Marathon machine? I'm not even a treadmill guy. At the starting line, Mike stared at the competition, towering crystalline Jorix, gelatinous blob creatures whose surfaces rippled with energy, and sleek, insectoid runners with extra limbs. Some competitors hovered instead of walking. Others seemed to vibrate in place, ready to launch themselves forward. Mike adjusted his sneakers and muttered, "Yeah, this seems fair." The robotic announcer's voice echoed overhead. Welcome to the Galactic Marathon of Endurance. Competitors will endure 5 challenges across mental, physical, and elemental extremes. First to complete all 5 phases wins. Mike cracked his neck. 5 phases? They're really leaning into this 5 times a day thing, huh? Zyla beamed. It's your brand. Phase 1, the heat run. The first phase was simple. Competitors had to sprint across a desert simulation chamber with temperatures soaring over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The Joric competitors immediately roared forward, their crystalline bodies absorbing the heat. The insectoid skittered ahead, moving with lightning speed. Mike jogged at a steady pace, sweat pouring down his face. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground beneath his feet burned like an oven. Humans can't survive this, muttered one alien spectator. Mike smirked as he pushed forward, recalling his childhood summers in Arizona. This is pool weather. By the time he reached the end of the simulation, Mike's legs were on fire, but 2 insectoids had already collapsed from heat shock, and a Joric competitor's crystalline plates had fractured under the strain. Humans endure heat. Zyla screamed from the sidelines, holding up a holographic sign that read, HFY. Phase 2, the Water Gauntlet. Phase 2 took competitors through a deep underwater tunnel, where gravity fields created immense pressure. Most species struggled to adapt to the crushing weight. The gelatinous competitors thrived, their bodies rippling as they flowed effortlessly through the currents. Mike swam clumsily but steadily, pushing through the water with slow, deliberate strokes. The crushing pressure reminded him of every time he'd been stuck in a public pool with obnoxious kids cannonballing around him. Just keep moving, he muttered through clenched teeth. 2 Jorics cracked under the pressure, their forms sinking toward the tunnel floor. Mike surfaced at the end, gasping for air but alive. Humans adapt to water pressure, the announcer boomed, to the shocked murmurs of the crowd. Phase 3, the gravity climb. The third phase was a vertical climb inside a simulated high-gravity zone. Competitors were forced to scale an endless cliff while enduring triple their normal body weight. Mike stared up at the challenge and muttered, "Great." They added leg day. The insectoid competitors skittered up quickly, but the weight began crushing them halfway. Jorics clawed their way upward with sheer strength but fractured under the strain. Mike gripped the cliff, muscles screaming. Every inch upward felt like hauling a freight train. "Don't quit now," he whispered to himself, pushing past the pain. One step at a time. One step at a time. Aliens watching from the observation platforms marveled as Mike continued his steady ascent, sweat dripping and muscles trembling but never stopping. "Does he thrive on punishment?" one alien asked in disbelief. "Humans are insane," muttered another. Phase 4, the Mind Trap. Phase 4 tested competitors' mental endurance in a psychoneural chamber, where illusion and hallucination tried to break their focus. Competitors had to resist the mental strain for as long as possible. Mike sat in the chamber, electrodes strapped to his temples. The first hallucinations began almost immediately, disorienting flashes, mocking voices, and spinning walls. Mike blinked slowly. "This is just like finals week back in college," he muttered. Or that one time I drank gas station coffee. He planted his feet on the floor, shut his eyes, and let his mind drift into a stubborn, half-meditative state. The illusions raged, but he refused to give in. Phase 5, the final sprint. The last phase was a straight run to the finish line, through zero-gravity turbulence. Competitors were flung around violently by shifting gravity fields, their momentum disrupted at every turn. The Jorick champion pushed forward with raw strength, roaring in frustration as gravity spun him in circles. Mike grunted as the turbulence sent him tumbling head over heels. Just keep moving, he growled. With short bursts of effort, he propelled himself forward through the chaos, crawling and kicking his way toward the end. Victory, humanity's triumph. Mike's hand slapped the finish line panel just seconds before the Jorick champion. The crowd froze in stunned silence before erupting into deafening cheers. The human champion, Mike Brennan, has won the Galactic Marathon of Endurance. Mike lay on the ground, breathing hard, grinning despite the pain. Zyla practically tackled him, her tendrils glowing gold with excitement. "You did it," she screamed. "You proved it again, humans don't stop." Mike laughed weakly. "Yeah. We're stubborn like that." The announcer's voice echoed. "Humans, nature's marathon machines." Mike Brennan sat on the floor of his quarters aboard Station Theta 9, surrounded by half-empty water bottles and the lingering aches of victory. His legs throbbed. His shoulders felt like they'd been pulverized by a jackhammer. And yet, there was something oddly satisfying about all of it. He grinned tiredly at Zyla, who paced his room, her datapad glowing like a star. "You're everywhere, Mike," she chirped. "The Galactic Alliance can't stop talking about you. You're a legend." Mike rubbed his face, groaning. "I'm a sore legend, Zyla. My hamstrings are plotting revenge." Zyla ignored him, flicking through her datapad. "Look. There are entire broadcasts analyzing your performance in the Galactic Marathon of Endurance. Scientists are calling you biologically improbable. Warriors want to train like you. And some are terrified." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Terrified? Look at this." Zyla projected a holographic screen into the air. On it, a sleek, insectoid news anchor discussed humanity's surprising rise to fame. "Breaking news, humanity's victory in the Galactic Marathon has sparked fierce debates across the Alliance. Are humans a simple, stubborn species, or the galaxy's next great power?" The screen shifted to a split image of Mike grinning at the finish line and a Jorick warrior sprawled, defeated, in the sand. An alien analyst, resembling a sentient coral reef, clicked irritably. "Humans should not be underestimated. Their resilience defies logic. No efficient species wastes so much energy on repetition. Yet they endure." Another commentator, a gas-like entity swirling in a containment tank, sounded skeptical. "Are they truly exceptional, or simply reckless? This 5 cycles nonsense could be a mere quirk." The anchor's voice echoed ominously, "And what happens when this endurance is applied beyond competition? Imagine humans in war. In exploration. In leadership." Mike blinked at the hologram. "Wait. Did they just call me a potential galactic threat?" Zyla beamed. "Isn't it great? You're feared and admired." Mike flopped back onto his bunk, groaning. "I didn't sign up to be humanity's poster boy for stubbornness. I just wanted lunch." Council Summit, the debate. The Galactic Alliance Council, a massive interstellar governing body, convened on Theta 9 to discuss humanity's sudden rise. The chamber, filled with ambassadors, scientists, and warriors, buzzed with tension. Floating screens replayed Mike's victories over and over, his marathon win, his mental focus, his triumph against the Jorick elite. At the center of the room, Ambassador Thralic of the Jorick Dominion stood, his molten eyes glaring. This human has humiliated us. Twice. We've all seen the recordings, said a serpentine ambassador with shimmering scales. The human stamina is undeniable. Yet it raises a question: what are the limits of their endurance? Ambassador Thralic pounded his crystalline fist on the table. Humans claim they perform these feats 5 times a day. Madness. If true, they possess a biological advantage no species can match. A soft hum came from a floating gas entity. Perhaps we're looking at this wrong. Could humans be a valuable ally instead of a threat? Thralic scoffed. Or a problem we need to address now, before they challenge the balance of power. The council chamber erupted in debate, voices overlapping in alien tongues. The human response. Mike found himself dragged into the council chamber, flanked by Zyla, who was, of course, thrilled, and 2 nervous human diplomats from Earth who had just arrived. Please tell me we're not going to war over my jogging skills, Mike muttered to Zyla. You're fine, she said cheerfully. Just don't say anything dumb. The council's attention turned to Mike as he stepped to the center platform. Thralic's glowing gaze bore into him like a spotlight. Human, Thralic growled. We demand answers. How does your species endure such strain? How do you repeat tasks without breaking? Mike glanced at the watching crowd, hundreds of alien ambassadors, journalists, and soldiers, then scratched the back of his neck. It's not that complicated, he said. Humans just keep going. It's what we do. A murmur rippled through the chamber. You keep going? Asked a crystalline ambassador skeptically. Explain. Mike sighed, searching for the right words. Look, we're not the strongest. We're not the fastest. Heck, half the time we don't even know what we're doing. But when things get tough, humans push through it. We fail. We get up. And we try again. Thralic sneered. And that's supposed to impress us? Yeah, Mike shot back. Because that's how we survive. It's how we build. It's how we win. Zyla, standing nearby, beamed as she whispered, HFY. The council's decision. The chamber fell silent as the council deliberated. Thralic's objections were loud and clear, but other species, intrigued by humanity's spirit, argued for an alliance. Finally, a floating counselor addressed the room. It is clear that humanity possesses a unique endurance and adaptability. While they are not yet a major power, their potential cannot be ignored. From this day forward, humanity shall be offered a seat on the Endurance Federation, a group dedicated to peace, survival, and exploration across the galaxy. Zyla shrieked in delight, her tendrils flashing bright gold. Mike, you're an ambassador now. Humanity's endurance has made history. Mike blinked. Wait, what? The aftermath. Mike found himself sitting at a round table later that day, surrounded by nervous Earth diplomats, Zyla, and the occasional Joric warrior glaring at him from across the station cafe. So let me get this straight, Mike said. I'm now part of the Alliance's elite endurance federation, and humans are getting a reputation as the most stubborn species in the galaxy. Pretty much. Zyla said, stuffing her mouth with glowing snacks. The lead Earth diplomat adjusted his glasses. It's unprecedented. We've gone from curiosity to power players almost overnight. We're being seen as allies for exploration missions, survival teams, and long-term space colonies. Mike shook his head with a tired grin. All because I didn't quit during some ridiculous challenges. You're the perfect representative of humanity, Zyla said proudly. Mike chuckled. I'm just a guy who didn't sit down when I was tired. The diplomat smiled. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the galaxy. Across the stars. The legend of humanity spread like wildfire. Tales of their endurance, their stubbornness, and their ability to do things 5 times a day became the stuff of galactic myth. Warriors trained to emulate their grit. Scientists studied their habits. Explorers requested human companions for long-haul missions. And Mike Brennan, the accidental hero, received messages from Earth. "Mike, what did you do out there?" Mike leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee and watching alien children playing a game called Human Marathon outside the cafe window. He grinned. "I guess we showed them who we are." The legend of humanity had spread like a ripple through the stars, expanding to systems far beyond Station Theta 9. Mike Brennan, the so-called Endurance Ape, was now a galactic icon. On alien news networks, humans were described as biologically improbable, psychologically unbreakable, and a species that doesn't know when to stop. To Mike, all of this still felt ridiculous. He was just a guy who didn't like giving up, and somehow, that had shaken an entire interstellar civilization. A call to exploration. A month after his victory at the Galactic Marathon of Endurance, Mike sat in the small cafe near Theta 9's observation deck, drinking his beloved Earth coffee. Zyla sat across from him, scrolling through a holographic tablet that constantly pinged with notifications. "You're really popular, Mike," Zyla said, her tendrils flickering a delighted yellow. "You've been requested on 14 exploration missions. One fleet called you an essential biological asset." Mike sighed, sipping his drink. "Great. I'm officially a mascot." "Not just a mascot," Zyla corrected. "The Varric Explorers Union wants you to lead the first joint endurance mission to uncharted space. They said they need a human." Mike paused mid-sip, blinking. "Wait, what?" "It's huge," Zyla said, sliding the tablet toward him. "They want to test the limits of interstellar travel. Gravity anomalies, long-term physical strain, isolation, everything humans are supposedly good at. And they want you to represent Earth." Mike stared at the glowing hologram, a swirling star map outlining a region marked the abyssal expanse. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that they want me to sit on a spaceship, endure endless travel, and keep going when everyone else wants to quit?" "Exactly." Zyla beamed. "It's what you humans do." Mike snorted, shaking his head. "Well, they're not wrong." The mission, into the abyss. 2 weeks later, Mike stood on the bridge of the Aurora Dawning, a sleek, multi-species exploration vessel surrounded by the best minds and explorers the Galactic Alliance had to offer. Alien crew members bustled about, gelatinous engineers, crystalline Joric warriors, insectoid pilots, each focused on the daunting task ahead. The abyssal expanse was a region of space that swallowed entire fleets. Ships vanished into its gravitational storms, communications collapsed, and the few survivors spoke of disorienting loops and unrelenting silence. Most species considered it too dangerous to explore. Mike, on the other hand, saw it as Tuesday. At the center of the bridge, Captain Voren, a sleek reptilian with glimmering scales, addressed the crew. "This mission will test us all," Voren said, his voice grave. "The expanse has broken fleets far stronger than ours. But now we have something no other species did, a human." The crew turned to look at Mike, who was munching on a protein bar. He waved awkwardly. Hi. Phase 1, the endless voyage." The journey into the abyssal expanse began smoothly enough. Stars streaked past the viewport as the Aurora Dawning slipped into FTL travel, its crew bustling with quiet confidence. After 4 days, tensions began to rise. The expanse's infamous gravitational storms warped the ship's trajectory, forcing constant course corrections. Time itself felt distorted, hours stretched into eternity, and minutes vanished without warning. Crew members began showing signs of fatigue. Mike, on the other hand, was thriving. "How do you do it?" Voren asked, watching as Mike jogged laps through the corridors for exercise. Mike shrugged, breathing easily. "Humans are good at dealing with boredom. It's our thing. We get tired, sure, but we're stubborn enough to push through. Just keep moving, Captain." That's the trick. His words became a mantra for the crew: keep moving. Phase 2, Gravitational Chaos. By the second week, the ship encountered a gravity well, a phenomenon that trapped them in a swirling vortex of force. The pressure grew immense, forcing systems offline. Crew members struggled to remain conscious. The Jorik warriors cracked under the strain, their crystalline armor fracturing as they tried to maintain operations. Even Voron's voice wavered as he gave orders. Mike sat in the engine bay, holding a wrench in one hand and forcing a damaged valve back into place. Sweat poured down his face, but he grinned through it. "Hold the line, people," he shouted through the comms. 1 minute at a time. You don't stop. You don't quit. His voice seemed to anchor the crew. Inspired by his relentless pace, engineers patched systems, pilots stabilized the ship, and the Aurora Dawning clawed its way free of the vortex. Phase 3, Isolation. Days turned to weeks, and the expanse tested the crew's mental resilience. Vast stretches of empty void surrounded the ship, endless darkness pressing in from all sides. Communication systems failed. The hum of the engines became a haunting, repetitive drone. Crew members whispered about the silence. Some spoke of shadows moving in the dark. Mike took it all in stride. He played cards with the insectoid pilots, told dumb Earth jokes to the gelatinous engineers, and taught Voron how to make instant coffee from a pouch. "You don't fear the void?" Voron asked one evening, watching Mike sip coffee in the observation lounge. Mike shrugged. "It's just empty space. Back on Earth, we stare at empty walls in traffic jams. At least out here, there's a view." The captain stared at him for a long moment before breaking into a rare smile. "Humans are strange." "Yeah," Mike said, raising his coffee. "But we're still here." Phase 4, The Breakthrough. On the 45th day, sensors detected something extraordinary, a star system hidden within the expanse. Planets swirled around a pulsing blue star, untouched and pristine, a discovery worth the risk of the voyage. The crew erupted in cheers, overwhelmed by their success. Voron turned to Mike, his scales shimmering with gratitude. "This was possible because of you, Mike Brennan. Your people are remarkable." Mike grinned, leaning back in his chair. "We're not special. We just don't know when to quit." The return, humanity's gift. When the Aurora Dawning returned to Station Theta 9, the news of the successful mission spread faster than light. The Galactic Alliance hailed humanity as explorers, pioneers of endurance, and champions of the impossible. At the celebration banquet, Zyla toasted Mike with a glowing glass of some alien beverage. "You did it. Humanity has changed the galaxy." Mike raised his glass. "We just showed you what we do best, stick to it. Whether it's work, challenges, or exploration, humans don't stop." The alien dignitaries around him nodded solemnly, their respect for humanity solidified. Epilogue, A Galaxy That Endures. Months later, Mike sat in a quiet observation lounge, watching the stars outside Theta 9. Across the galaxy, humans were now integral to exploration, diplomacy, and survival missions. Their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn species had been earned. Zyla plopped down beside him. "So, what's next for you?" Mike smirked, sipping his coffee. "Same as always. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. One step at a time." As he looked out into the vast, uncharted stars, he smiled. Humanity was just getting started.